We're very happy to be doing this panel on the role of sport in development in association with Africa Sports Unified, a really pioneering organization based here in the UK to look at the African sports landscape and figure out ways to improve it. So I'm going to turn over right now. Please give him a warm round of applause to Gabriel Ajala.
Thanks for that, Joseph. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you guys being here. And as Joseph said, we are about to kick off an intriguing and fun panel on sports development in Africa. And I have three wonderful people with me here who are much more clued up than I am on this sector, so it'd be good. Firstly, I would love to welcome up a good friend of mine. He runs a global sports agency. It's called Kairos Global Management. So if we could give a round of applause for Dwayne Lyade to welcome up. Thank you. Also, guys, don't be shy. I like interaction and participation. So you can tweet, you can Instagram, you can do what you want, but be engaged, because this is a rare occasion to have people like this on the stage. So be prepared to ask questions and to give feedback, okay? Fantastic. Next up, could you please welcome up Jayraj Jadeja from Football for Peace. Thank you so much. Can we give a round of applause too? And lastly, can we welcome up, there he is, Rakesh Gupta, please, CEO of Say Invest. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, I kind of alluded to the format already. Yeah, I kind of alluded to the format already. So our panelists are going to introduce themselves, tell everyone what they do, and then we're going to go straight to the floor for questions on sports development and your thoughts on what's going on in the continent and the Commonwealth. Cool, so Dwayne, over to you. Please introduce yourself, your background, what you do in sports, and where you find yourself currently.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me. My name is Dwayne Lyade. I'm the director for Kairos Global Management. I'm a sports agent. We work across football, rugby, and boxing. I currently represent players playing English Premier League down to League 2 in England and abroad as well. I work with, as a consultant, to different football clubs in the Premier League and also to different countries in Africa in regards to commercial activities, organizing friendly matches, for example, England against Nigeria. I do that contracts on behalf of Nigeria and other countries in Africa as well that I work with. And yeah, so that's a bit about myself.
Fantastic. Jayraj, do you want to introduce yourself and what you do?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Jay Jadeja. I'm the Global Director at Football for Peace Global, which is an international charity. Our role today is all around using football as a vehicle to address some of the most pressing issues that the globe are facing. We work off 5 main pillars, which include equality, poverty, social justice, it loses me, but and it's all about using football as a vehicle to address these issues through our activities, which include our global peace matches, which act as demonstrations of how footballers and football can play a role in driving key messages around the world, from equality to reconciliation to poverty. We work diplomatic symposiums, working with member states, UN agencies, and stakeholders within the football world to, again, host conversations and challenge policies around how football can play a role to address some of these issues at community level. Coalition campaigns is another element of Football for Peace, again, working with professional footballers, football industry leaders around driving a key message. I think for us, Africa is super interesting. I think there's 4 billion people that play football or engaged in football around the world, and I want to say a big percentage of that is coming out of Africa, you know. So it has always been a learning curve for us going into Africa. We recently embarked on a trip with President George Weah to Liberia about some of the work we're doing, and I think it was there where we really understood some of the challenges that communities and young people are facing, and how football can play a real role in engaging them via education, via sustainability, and addressing some of the issues that communities are facing.
Yep. Fantastic. Rakesh, do you want to introduce yourself and your background, what you do?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Myself, Rakesh Gupta, and I head a global boutique advisory based out of New York. We keep on advising on the alternate investment strategies, which could be sports, one of them. I wish I would have pursued my career in cricket. I would have been a much better player, because I have played first class for India way back, years back. My association with sports regarding alternate investment has been quite remarkable in the last couple of years. I was invited by my alma mater, Columbia Business School, to address the NBA Players Association. And I think that's where I addressed 120 NBA players along with the owners on the impact of sports, where my core subject was that why institutional investors and other investors need to invest in sports, not keeping in view of the traditional returns, but keeping in view of the upliftment of the society, the community through the sports, because sports is one of the most magnetic kind of tool which connects across politics, across country, across regions. So I do believe that there is a huge opportunity in the Africa region, especially what my co-panelist was talking about, 4 billion people playing football. The way we have seen the first Nigerian playing for Manchester United, the kind of hype he has got it. So that demonstrates the importance of sports in Africa. So I'll take a pause there. Thanks.
Thanks for your introductions. And from how you guys have introduced yourself, one in agency, grassroots, and investments. So that may not be particular for sports development from an outside looking in, their first thoughts. So from each of your individual sectors where you're coming from, what is your view currently on the development of sports in Africa? Dwayne, first up.
For myself, I'm in a fortunate place of having a good relationship with some of the African federations, and the way in which I view directorship is that I assist them in making money in terms of commercial opportunities, and I use my relationship with different clubs abroad and also partnerships abroad to bring them into Africa to help these federations in development of technical staff, grassroots football. So for myself is helping them to grow financially and advising on how to spend, if that makes sense, and how to grow the sports in the individual countries. I think there's only maybe perhaps at times so much you can do from outside in when you're consulting a federation in Africa because of the structure in place. So at times you find to some extent all you can do is advise and bring opportunities to the table for them, whether that's partnership with different clubs abroad, federations abroad, in terms of in Europe, who can help them develop their grassroots football. So for myself, it's usually really using my relationships that I have in Europe with different people in different clubs. I'm bringing that to the table for these African federations and also sponsors for them as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Jay?
Yeah, I think for Football for Peace to really have a stance on the development of football is something that we're not in. Yeah. And I know there's a lot of work on the ground in Africa and a lot of learning going on, as our colleague suggested, in terms of that development. We're obviously in the space of using football as a vehicle for engagement and retention when it comes to education. The challenges that we have had is when delivering and engaging young people in football and educational programs, there is sometimes the confusion of, is there an element of football development? You know, an NGO coming out from Europe, coming into Africa, you know, there's sometimes the feeling of, is this a platform for players to be taken into football development, where it's really around, you know, retention in education, driving a key message that we really want to utilize, and using football as a vehicle to really engage.
Yeah. Rakesh, and yourself, I know you've had some experience as well with the NBA. So from your perspective, how do you see sports development on the continent?
We only know one thing, which is investments. So that's the only thing we know better. And I'm sure the world over looks about it. Maybe because much of our strength is about investment practices and investment strategies. And the new era is improvising in a much better way, where people or institutions are also looking about investing in sports. And that's where possibly I'm going to be advocating, is about that invest in sports. It is not going to be your traditional investments with a higher return, but invest in sports, which could also create the new generation to contribute to the country. And that is where it leads to the better GDP and all those things. And I spoke about economy yesterday, so I don't want to dwell upon it now. But from the sports perspective, I can only understand is that there are huge amount of challenges, but huge amount of opportunities also.
Yep.
So from purely from the opportunistic space, I would advise to my institutions also, is that please look at Africa largely from the sports angle. There are a lot of things to do. Maybe after first round or second round, when you start making 100,000 people capacity stadiums, you will start making money. But now look at from a grassroots investment perspective.
If I may also add to what my colleagues have said, in regards to the development of sports in Africa, I think one of the challenges that we have, one of the things we need to look at, is creating an ecosystem. Until the countries, the federations, come to an understanding that there needs to be a creation of an ecosystem in regards to how things work for the sports industry, we will consistently develop and export, and nothing will be built inside the actual continent and the countries. And I think that could affect generations to come, if that makes sense. So I think there needs to be an understanding of what ecosystem looks like for each federation. There needs to be an understanding of what partnership looks like in regards to within Africa, between the countries. And I think that needs to be looked at very soon, or else things can get in a bit of a grey area.
I agree with you, and just to follow on from that, it obviously being in the UK, we have the privilege of being in a position where the market is more developed in Africa. And so when you speak to people here, everyone started from humble beginnings, but it's about having a long-term plan to see that through. I think as everyone can allude to here, Africa has always been a place where you go, you take the commodity, and Africa just remains the way it is, and everywhere else advance. But as Dorian alluded to, if we actually have real change and see sustainable growth, there needs to be a long-term plan and an ecosystem. And I think that's why it's fantastic here that we're talking about sports development, and we have an agent, we have someone grassroots, and we have an investment. Rakesh, do you want to add into that?
I just want to give one live example. As we know, India is possibly one of the biggest cricketing country in the world. And I come from a city called Calcutta, which is largely known for football. But India is a country where everybody wants to invest in cricket. And today, Calcutta happens to have one stadium, which is possibly one of the two biggest stadiums in the world in football, not cricket. Cricket is also possibly the largest stadium in the world. Football stadium, where both Aguero and Messi went to play because of the crowd side. Largely because of the commercial angle, because when you have 110,000 people wearing Messi t-shirts, you are going to make a lot of money. But how the ecosystem changes that, because the promotion of the sports forced also the government to start actively investing in the sports and creating new talents. And I think that is one of the reasons which my former panel guys were talking about, how you can make, or how you would like the government to be enabler to promote the sports and develop something indigenously for the local people. So that was my example for that.
That's right, and even following on from that, how actually, because even in the previous panel we mentioned about government involvement. So in order for a real advance to occur, or to enable Dwayne to do what he wants to do, or for Football for Peace to initiate campaigns and whatnot, for investment to come in, what role, or how important is the role of government, and what can be done, or what would you like to see put in place for there to maybe ease things in order for real change to come? I'm not trying to allude to anything, but I'm just asking.
I think I'll pick this up first. I think the most important part with government is, especially going into new territories, is license. If they give you the license to work and operate within communities, I think is a big factor. As we know, there are challenges working with governments all around the world, and you don't want to hold your breath in terms of them supporting you. I think it goes back down to really supporting the people and the community and giving them the vehicle, giving them the tools, giving them the education and ability to live sustainable lives independently. Don't be relying on anybody. Obviously, the government gives you the license to engage with these young people, but I think it's really about upskilling, it's really about educating, it's really about empowering people within communities and the next generation, the generation before that, to really make a long-lasting change within those communities.
Yeah. Prakash, do you want to touch on that?
Taking back what my co-panelist was talking about, I think I would like to completely define in possibly much black and white kind of scenario, even though investments are never black and white. They're always gray in color, which people may not like it. But possibly institutional investment always forces one way or the other the government to be a participative involvement. So once any big investor goes to maybe Ghana or maybe Nigeria or maybe Uganda, whichever part of the world they want to go, once they start investing in the local infrastructure, and that is where it prompts or enables the government to start looking at that as a serious player. But till then, government will only do the lip servicing, which one of my fellow panelists was talking about in the previous session. So this is where I think the private players like us makes impact onto that, and then it leads the government to be more proactive to take it seriously. So that is what.
Dwayne, some words on that?
I think when it comes to governance in sports, I think what I found is the chairman of the federations or the president, when you're going in, I think the most important thing is whether you're an investor or someone coming into as a consultant, is understanding their position, because they have so much pressure from whether that's FIFA, CAF, the national government, executive committees. So it's understanding, okay, what are all these pressures and how are they handling them? And then understanding the vision of the people in government themselves. Do we need government in regards to the development of sports in the country? I think it helps because they can either support or kill what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I'm talking in regards to experience where we went into a certain country to help with the development of rugby for that country. And there was a few passionate people who were passionate about rugby in England, in either from different countries coming together to go into this African country together. And we started taking the national team to different, to Dubai, to South Africa. And the government looked at and said, okay, where are you guys getting the money from? And then they came in and took over when they saw what we were doing. And then when they got to basically saw the bank account, they thought, okay, there's no money here. How are you guys getting the team across the whole world? But it was literally people who had goodwill and good intentions helping the national team. So, but when they took over, everything basically died, if that makes sense. So it's one of those where you need to maybe at times find a way to work with the government. You need to understand the government's vision, the government's plan for the nation, for the people, for the area and for that sport, and see if there's any way in which you can support that or impact that. But at the same time, there's also things you can do at grassroots level as a private company to develop.
Touching on that too, and another question around the governance of sport. Africa is known for its commodities, as I mentioned before. If you look at mobile phones, electric vehicles, even labor, infrastructure, oil to help grow, and invest and entice investment at the same time. But from your knowledge and even from organizations such as Football for Peace, are we seeing a change in maybe nations on the continent who are looking at sports as a way to grow and improve social and economic development. Jay, do you have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely, I think you're absolutely spot on. I think if you look at any powerful vehicles in the world, be it music, be it food, sport and football in Africa is probably one of the biggest. In India, it's cricket. You know, so I mean, in anyone's sense, they're going to look at, you know, where is their engagement, where is the opportunities, and sport is definitely an opportunity to go into new territories or going to Africa. There's definitely a fine line, as you suggested, of, you know, coming in and taking advantage of the situation via sport, or actually using sport as a positive vehicle to create sustainable communities and really build on the infrastructure in Africa.
And Doi, how about yourself? I know you got experience on the continent. Are you, through your conversations, are you noticing a change from the powers that be in terms of the importance of sports, and not just playing, but actually helping to drive an economy?
I think that's one of the most important things that people need to understand, I think, in the continent, that until you see sport as an industry that will create employment, will improve skills, is a skilled industry, until they start seeing that aspect of the sports industry, I think it would just be seen as a lot of people playing on the field and making money, if that makes sense. But until you see beyond that you can actually create billion-dollar industry and beyond from, if you utilize the resources appropriately. I think that's one of the key things. And I think, like I said, I think the challenge that we have is we need to come into a place of generational thinking. Because to build what we're talking about here, whether that's using sport as a way to drive the economy, to drive different areas of the country, is not a 1, 2 year, 3 year program. I was looking to a very strong league in terms of around the world who wants to come into Africa, and they said the challenge they have is that some countries want to invest for a year in the development of the sports, and then after a year, the second year there's no investment. So I think until we have generational thinkers in place, to use sports to drive this kind of the economy could be a challenge.
Yeah, that is the big question, isn't it? And Rakesh, even from your perspective, you mentioned about investment in cricket, how we've seen. Was there an initial stance from government to bring in this investment, or was it through private sector that this initially happened, this development in grassroots?
Good. I'll just add on to that, but
Yeah.
prior to that, I'll add something which I'm sure some of the people would have seen it. After the Olympics at Rio, Morgan Stanley came up with a wonderful, unique report, which says that based on the medals you win in the Olympics, how good, bad, or inversely it is related to your GDP numbers. And I think based on that report, there were some countries who was won medal, they should be at much higher GDP, wherein the others shouldn't. And one of the reasons why they've outlined is that African GDP doesn't matches to the medal tally. Why? Because possibly it is more of an individual driven, not the government driven. But the government is trying to take the credit of the GDP numbers. So that was a parity-disparity story, and I think that is where it leads to my point, is about why it's not the onus on the private investors, but also from the government to create an infrastructure on the local part. Because eventually, the more gold you win, in one way or the else, in terms of quantitative stock power index, it adds up to your own GDP numbers. So that was on that. So I'll take a pause there, but I'll address your point now. On the cricket side, the government was never at all interested to develop cricket in India, because a host of political leadership, that's why possibly governance issue comes. Host of political leaders wanted to control the cricketing body because of the cash it generates. I think eventually when there was too much of cash, the government started intervening it, because that's where they wanted to take the cash back. But what one thing has good happened is that in last 12 months or 8 months quite actively, is that the government has also come up with a new regulation, which is largely a people pressure regulation, is that only the former players would be governing the boards. So I think that is where it's a much larger comes under the governance and accountability part. And I think that is where the government is now stepping in, up to a limited way. But also the private players are, forcing the government to go more on governance and regulation. So that is a good thing and bad thing, both the things happening.
Yeah. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to open it to the floor. So just prepare your questions. If you have 5, if you have 10, we'll welcome them all, okay? So just warn in advance. So this is more directed at Football for Peace in terms of the campaigns and the projects that you've done. What components do you potentially look for in order to, okay, we'll do a campaign here, and what makes those successful?
No, absolutely. Just going back to the introduction, I think our trips to Africa and our learning has almost shaped the transition of Football for Peace. In terms of the pillars of equality, poverty, is something that we did. And that trip to Africa actually taught us to include sustainability around climate change and water. And water is a massive element that we're looking at in terms of developing in Africa. We did some projects in Rajasthan around water restoration, and now looking at an area in northern Mozambique around how we can, one, engage the community via football, but also teach them and give them the skills around water retention programs, working with partners, which is really key. And I think in terms of coalition campaigns and working in Africa, there's one thing that we definitely learned. Our projects in Europe and in UK around education are massively focused around engagement, getting young people involved via football, via, our role models. In Africa, the appetite to learn and go through education is massive. So that is not a problem. It's keeping them engaged and really driving the core message of what we're trying to drive is the tough part. And in terms of the coalition campaigns, we all know how powerful footballers are in terms of role models and the role they play in communities. So Football for Peace has always tried to put footballers at the forefront to engage young people and really drive the message. They'd rather hear it from the footballers than hearing it from me or any of us. So in terms of trying to drive the key message that we're trying to issue to these young people, it comes from footballers, and I think that's a key part of some of our campaigns and what we look for, really.
Thanks. So now we're going to take some questions from the floor. This gentleman over there in the brown, swaggy leather jacket.
You guys are doing quite good.
Does he need a microphone or?
Very much, very much.
Guess you have to shout. Let me come down.
Well, the proper description of me is I'm an ambassador, a goodwill ambassador. I'm the first licensed FIFA players agent from Liberia, and also I'm a politician here within the UK. My question here to the panel is, how can we go about and unpoliticize football, given the fact that I give an example per se. We have very good players in Africa, and one of the best players that has ever played in the world has been my president, His Excellency George Weah. There was a time people, they just brushed him aside, and then later on he shone and he became the best person in the world. But I'm saying this to say that my question is, with regards to how can we unpoliticize football, we have a lot of agents, and some of us, we go about and we have the goodwill of the African continent. I do not only represent Liberian football players. I represent players from all over the world, all over Africa, around the globe. Let me narrow that. But I'm saying this to say that when we bring players over, the next thing, sometimes other agents who are even not licensed, and they politicize the football, they try to give us the elbow so that we cannot get into the game to try to help fellow human beings as a whole. How can we go about and do things in such a way that we'll be able to police ourselves? Because when we go to FIFA, the litigation process is so long, and it's not a pleasant thing to go about with regards to litigation. At least we need to have to be able to censor ourselves, look into the matter, and bring things to an amicable close in the interest of fellow human beings, irrespective of colors, whether you came from Brazil or you came from Liberia or Angola or whatsoever. How can we go about to make things happen in the interest of fellow human beings?
Dwayne, you know I want to come to you for that answer.
So, talking about management of players and working with players taken from African countries, basically working with players from African continents, right? It's a challenge. I understand what you're saying, but I also understand from FIFA's standpoint or the Federation standpoint protecting players, because there are excellent agents, if that makes sense, and there are also agents who are working a bit of Wild Wild West way of operation. So there have been players that have been harmed by agents not operating properly, and those players have been blessed by agents operating properly. So it puts FIFA and federations in a bit of a certain area about how they go about governing agents and players, movement of players, agent operation. How do we go about it? Obviously, right now there is some discussions going on between FIFA and the agents about operation of how agents operate, management of players, salary cap. So there is much discussions going on, and I believe in the near future there'll be more clarity on it. Even the FIFA legal chief of staff was saying that they're yet to get maybe concrete clarity in regards to how they go about, especially in Africa, how they go about managing movement of players out of Africa and also agents. So it's a lot of things in discussion right now.
And just to allude on that too, as I'm sure both of you are aware, in Africa, the football pyramid isn't as secure. So we have many young players who are sold a dream to come to Europe and they're just put into human trafficking. So an area there is to educate clubs or national governing bodies to educate, I guess, young athletes and young players on the right agents to associate yourself with and how to conduct yourself moving forward. Because unfortunately, we have many cases of this which needs to be sorted out.
Okay, my question is, I've been seeing African players not succeeding in Africa. They would have to move to either Europe or other countries to be able to make it. So you working with government, how are you going to, or what should government do to improve the lives of players in Africa other than moving outside Africa to succeed?
Why don't we take a couple of questions and then we'll answer it.
Couple questions?
Yeah, a couple of questions and then we'll answer it.
Hello, Charlotte Koch for Green Architecture. It's a comment and something that I experienced. Back in 2010, I had the pleasure to hear the guy who was responsible during the World Cup in South Africa, 2010, for sport. That was amazing, how they actually used sport to avoid crime. So that's as a note. And then I was visiting 2012 already, also in South Africa, a project that was part the state chancellery of North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany, and the church, who had an exchange program, kind of, with something that they called Borussia Commondale. It was an exchange program and a support program of a German football club with a South African. You know, it was in the community. So this is on the grassroots level in the local community, but that can be taken on different levels also and be part of a bigger program that maybe gives them the opportunity, which is also kind of secure politically structured on a higher level when you find out who are the talents and who are interested in going abroad. That was it. Thank you.
We'll answer a few questions now. So do we want to answer your question about gentleman over here?
Shall I take them?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. To address your question about the government, creating infrastructure. Last week, or possibly 10 days back, I was speaking on a panel with Lord Sebastian Coe. I don't know how many of you know him. Lord Sebastian Coe happens to be the chairman for London 2012 Olympics. So one of the questions came up in the soft power was that why and how the government participation comes into the picture. And his first question is that government has got better things to do rather than doing these things. Maybe that was one way to promote that he and his team has done much better than the government could have done. But on the much larger scale, I think what he wanted to imply is about that till the time sports person won't take the lead to develop their own unity in terms of institutions, government won't head to anybody. It's the same old story, is that would the government start speaking to each and every sports person individual, or those individual sports person have created a complete robust institution in terms of sports body through which the government would deal. And once that happens, the government is much more pressurized to start investing in the grassroots level to create that infrastructure. That was something which I've learned in possibly last couple of weeks in terms of understanding it.
Sorry, Rakesh, just in addition to what was said, an interesting take which China have taken on around football and the government. They've made it mandatory for private sector to invest X amount of money into football because they understand how it portrays the country in the global atmosphere. So that is another really interesting take in terms of implementing that across the African continent. That, you know, there may be challenges, but that is one of the examples which I found really interesting from a country.
And if I may add to that, I think to keep African players in the country without exporting them to export to Europe or them moving to Europe, the fundamentals need to be right. So going back to quality of the pitch, fan engagement, how you welcome the fans to the stadium, quality of the stadium, the infrastructure, if that makes sense. So all those foundations need to be there to attract investors, private sector people to come in, and then put money towards the club, towards the league, that would then, in turn, payment for the players would then obviously match the quality of the players. Because right now, if you have quality players in those clubs, and they're not getting the wage they deserve, the club is of poor quality, they're not getting paid on time, matches are being cancelled, it's not very encouraging for the players. So for that to happen, you're saying to happen, the foundations need to be put in place. And that means the government putting money towards where they don't perhaps see an immediate return, but knowing that if they get the foundations right over the next 3-4 years in building the right stadiums, having the right structure in place, the right academies in place, the right pitches in place, the medical staff in place, then in turn, I think it will then attract the right investors and the right people to start supporting what you are alluding to.
Brilliant. Sir?
I'm Chris Imafidon, Professor Chris Imafidon. I work with inner city kids, and we have now done some collaboration with Rwanda, Sierra Leone, and we're doing some job in Ghana in trying to get sporting scholarships for the local talents. What I want you to say to us is, what is the real problem with the pipeline of real stars that plays at what I'm talking about, Premiership level? Because Arsene Wenger had some mini program when he was still at Arsenal, and he really pursued that aggressively. And number two, when will you prevail on the curriculum that is taught in primary school, that PE is not an optional subject, it's a fundamental subject that teaches resilience, exposes the children to teamwork, understanding that is needed in industry. So sports is not just a hobby or an interest, it brings in core issues in the curriculum that will be ignored for a long time. Because rugby was not designed because it's a game, it was designed to address so-called youth violence in 1896 by the YMCA. The whole thing about basketball was done because they knew that the youths had energy. So youth violence and youth and adolescence is not a problem that is new. They've always had it before. That's the point of having a piece of ball thrown around and men expressing their energy, youth expressing their energy. It's a crime reduction strategy. It's an economic strategy. Therefore, test the intelligence of every government by their commitment to sports as a tool for social cohesion and development. Thank you.
Brilliant questions. Brilliant statement.
Do you guys have any follow-up from what the gentleman just posted?
I mean, I think coming from us, we couldn't echo it more. And I think you're absolutely spot on. And I think it's about the industry and the big stakeholders really trying to implement this into the grassroots and into the infrastructure. If we're talking about the educational infrastructure, about the power of sport, as you suggested, not about developing sport, but how it develops individuals and young people for their life journey is second to none. So we definitely echo and 100% agree with your statement.
Let me just add on to, and I'll give you two examples. One is about NBA in US and other is about the new program in India. I think that is what something addresses your point is about. India started a complete new program almost 6 years back is about Play India Play. And one of the key reasons is that in that Play India Play, there won't be cricket. So the mainstream of sports, all sports which are covered in Olympics would be a key part of it, and you have to start practicing from 11 to 15, not after 15. So those are the couple of the things which India did very well, and I think that led them to win couple of unexpected medals also in the last Olympics. But that is kind of a program which has made PE as a part of your program curriculum, not as a part of your extra optional subjects. And I think that is where India has started producing best of the badminton player and so not, and the table tennis, and so many things have changed up. Because at a very young age, you have been imparted of that training, which leads up to one of the ways that possibly is in terms of, tackling the crime in the society also. And I think completely opposite would be the NBA, which has said that, sorry, we don't deal with the government, but we will create our own institutional body which will take care of the grassroots players and develop them. So if I take both the examples have been wonderful in terms of education, sports, tackling crime, society improvement, and there were so many host of things. But as one way you have an example of government taking a leading role, one way you have got an institution taking a role. So somehow if both the sides work together, I'm sure they will address your problem much better in terms of the larger, better Africa.
Do you have anything to follow up on that?
Just to add to what you said, which I think was fantastically said, by the way. I think when it comes to PE in schools, in primary schools, being a compulsory rather than an option, you made all the vital points in regards to reasons why it should be. But in addition to that, I believe when parents and also the kids see a pathway beyond secondary school, especially in PE, it encourages them. So if you were to instill PE in the African school, for example, if they understand that after secondary school, I can go and study sports science at college or at university, go and study to go into sports media, to go into the sports administrator in some capacity, and there's also employment beyond that has been created by the government, then I think that also encourages the younger ones and also the parents, because if there's for present excitement of PE, there's a bit of future hope in terms of what I can go into as well, if that makes sense. So I believe, although there are all the kind of important mental aspects of participating in PE, the physical aspect of participating in PE, but there should also be a pathway towards a profession in working in sports as well, created by the government, just to encourage participation in PE as well.
Yeah, I definitely echo your sentiments there. Not just with PE, but if you look at institutions, educational institutions who offer some sort of sports education, sports management, sports business course on the continent, I can count it on one hand. Whereas if you come to Europe, there's a plethora of organizations who do online courses, diplomas and things like that. So it does boil down again to education, even for people who want to go into this space, but for people who are already in the space, for our sports, people who hold the opportunities for sports, for them to upskill, for them to learn key principles about media, about sponsorship, about everything around sports. So we just need those educational platforms from institutions to educate the people in place. I know we don't have that much long left, but I want to ask a few questions and even follow up from what you said, Rakesh, about NBA. So for those who aren't aware, the NBA in collaboration with FIBA are launching the Basketball Africa League. It was meant to start this month actually, but because of our good and famous friend, coronavirus, it's been postponed. But it shall be happening. But on the announcements of the launch, we held an event last year and it was a mixed feedback from the people at the event about where the growth of African sports will come. Would it come from globally, from partners coming in, or would it come from within? And to my surprise, quite a lot of people, the response of the NBA wasn't as well as I thought it would be. So to you and the rest of the panel, in terms of real growth for sports for Africa, do you think it will come from, do you think it will or should come from within or from outside influence coming in?
My interaction, I spend almost 36 hours with the NBA players in various capacities, try to build up. One is that to advise them why and how these big players who have won almost millions and millions to invest and where to invest. But after spending time with them and understanding from them largely in terms of development of this game outside America, I think most of them was unanimous in one single thought is that till you don't have the local talent or till you don't nurture the local NBA players or local players who are interested in the NBA, you can't succeed NBA in that particular country or that particular part of the world. You can't be exporting American players to that country every now and then for the tournaments or whichever happens in that way. One of the key initiatives I think they have taken, NBA has started taking up in Africa also is about ways and means to find the indigenous players, because I think they relate with them very well in terms of the body shape or in terms of energy and power and other things. But they also believe is that they are the one who can invest. And I think NBA as an association is working very hard on Africa part. They are trying to see how they can develop the players. And I think I met one gentleman who was, well, if not, I think 7, 8 or kind of it. And this gentleman, when he was talking about it, he played NBA at the highest level and then he is retired. And today he is doing one thing, is about nurturing and growing new talents. Yeah. And I think when he was talking in his preliminary and he was talking about how he's going to go to Africa and what he are doing, I think that was commendable. So they themselves understand that nurturing local talent is the only solution to make the game globally outside America. I think one of the best example which we have seen is about cricket. I think today there are 11 countries in Africa who are a part of ICC forum in one way or the else. And I think most of them have started playing the T20s in the new era to compete in the new ICC T20 tournament. So that is how I think development of the local talent is making sense in that.
Okay, so a nice combination there for both. Jay, how about yourself?
Yeah, I think it's a real mixture of local and global. And I think in any institution or any country, you have to be willing to learn from better practices. And obviously there's challenges at all levels, whether it's corruption, whether it's whatever it is. But the willingness to learn has to be there. The willingness to adopt practices that work, such as the NBA, such as the Premier League, for example, such as other member states that take certain approaches around sport for development. I think that has to be part of the development in Africa. And I think mixed with the local appetite, which I think is definitely apparent, I think then you've got a recipe for success.
I see a few hands. We're going to come back to questions to end up, but Dwayne, do you want to just answer that question too?
I think they've both spoken well and amplified my thoughts really. But I just say to add to what they've said is accountability is key for this to happen appropriately. And it's from the simple things, making them understand that you can't pay the team hotel bills in cash. You can't bring a load of cash into the hotel and just because there's no trace of it. That makes sense. Just being accountable about the spending of the organization, the investors able to see the fruits of the investments, whether that's local or international. So I think being responsible and being accountable is one of the key things that will attract and drive both foreign and local investors.
Yeah. Right. A few more questions, then we shall close. Just the two over here.
3 are there.
3?
3 are there.
Oh, 3, fantastic. 4.
Take
5,
everybody's
6, 7.
questions. We would like to listen to you. I'm leaving football because
Thank you.
I'm a big time Man U fan.
My question
Okay.
is
I've played it
really,
at the stadium for a trial match.
my question is really based around the new sport introduced into the Paris 2024, which is breakdance. And I question if there's any conversations and if you've heard any conversations or potential investments in this field in African countries and how we, as an organization that's interested in implementing across, might go about doing so. Right now we have prototyped a league in Tanzania and we're hoping to take that same league. So it's just a conversation on what you know about that being a possibility in a new sport in the Paris Olympics and how you might be moving towards that.
Let's take 2 and then we'll answer those. Someone else? This gentleman here.
Thank you very much. My name is Chenjira Shiri. I'm not a sportsman, but my little brother actually is a CEO of London Basketball School. He's actually introduced basketball into this country. Now, the question I want to ask the panel, I can see you are lovely in terms of your cricket, or in India. I love Sri Lanka, brilliant. There's only men supporting or talking about sports in Africa. Now, the game which is played by most children in primary school in Southern Hemisphere is netball. And there is no investment in any school or investment in young kids at school, women, in relation to this women's sport. There is a lot of investment in football in South Africa when they did their football, men kicking football. But there was not even a single investment on women sport, which is actually played by all the young women in schools in Africa. So I probably would like you to also inform me a little bit as sports, as people who are trying to promote sports in Africa outside this men kicking ball.
So let's answer those 2. So new sports on the continent and other sports other than kicking ball.
Okay. My answer to the gentleman is that it's not that I only follow cricket. I also follow netball, and I've also seen the emergence and growth of Uganda, the way they made life difficult for England in the netball. So those Ugandese ladies, they played outstandingly to beat England in one of those matches. So I do follow netball also. But I think your larger point was about the grassroots support which is required in the netball in the Southern Hemisphere. As a private investors, I've never seen anybody taking a key role of that because of the emergence of sports. And today, if you see any big private players or any big institutions who are taking a role in that, they're largely taking in cricket, NBA or football. The same man plays with the balls kind of story. But I think slowly when the sport emerges into a big money spending machine, maybe not, I think somewhere private investment would come. But I would take your point that the government should be more proactive to invest in these kind of things rather than trying to host much bigger games and spend much more money on things which could only improvise their soft power rankings, not about sports rankings. That was my thought on that. About the other gentleman's thought about the breakdance, if I'm not wrong, that was the point. Honestly, I have no clue about the sports generating money in terms of taking it to a next level. This may be a sport because I know for sure that's a wonderful dance. But then treating that dance into a sport is something I'm not very familiar with. And since I'm not familiar with that subject, I would not like to comment much on that.
Just because of time,
Please.
we're going to take one more question. I know Joseph is rushing me. We're going to do it as another duel, okay? And we leave for one person to answer. So you go first.
I'm really just interested in hearing the panel's views about African women in football, in kind of that space. And I want to know how you've engaged women groups in the work that you have done to sort of encourage African women within that particular space, which is very, very dominated by men, as we know.
Before you answer, let's take just one more.
I just want to ask the panel and how you're encouraging parents in Africa to encourage their children who want to pursue sports as a career. Because I've got friends over here in the diaspora that they actually wanted to be a footballer, but their parents wanted them to be medical doctors and they were discouraged. And there was even one that he was actually interested in sport and the mother was trying to like divert him to go to university. He lost interest in sports and went to university, but when he finished university, he got involved in crime and is in prison now. Just like one of the members of the audience says sports can be a crime reduction strategy. So are parents in Africa hindering the development of sports, especially when youth want to pursue it as a career?
I've been summoned for one more. So let's not forget those questions, please. One last one. Just one last one.
The wonderful lady.
Following on from what the lady said about parents discouraging their children from doing sports and pushing them towards education, have you thought about what America does with the incentive of offering scholarships and they have to hit a certain point to get into university? That's something that could be an incentive where they don't have to pick or choose, they do both. And then they're supported by the government and the scholarships and et cetera, which would be a win-win for everybody.
Doyen, final word on it, then we wrap up.
Wow. Okay, first one about education and sports. I don't think you need to separate, like you mentioned, sports from education. I mean, with my clients, for example, there are several of them who are playing and in education at the same time. Nigeria International, Apan, one of my clients, is currently about to engage in the sports directorship at MNU, Manchester, and is also playing football at the same time. So he's just communicating the importance of it to them, that, about education, without distracting their passion or their talent in football. So I don't think you necessarily need to separate both, but I don't think, I think it's just getting an understanding of how you communicate the importance of education while allowing them to prosper in their gifting, if that makes sense. Women in football. I actually think there are countries in Africa now who are paying closer attention to women in football. Liberia being one of them. I actually know, as mentioned, the people in Liberian government who I speak to, and they're actually playing a very key, women in football is a very key thing for them right now. The president's wife, I believe, is supporting women in football in Liberia as well. Sorry?
That was the buzzer. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So I think there are pockets of countries now who are making it a very important area of the curriculum in sports.
All right, I think we'll have to leave it there. Let's give this panel a warm round of applause and pause for a quick photo before our next panel.